Dragon's Dogma, a game that came out to decent reception, but was buried by other behemoth titles that dropped near its release, leaving it to the fate of cult classic. I was one of the people who actually played the original, though I can't quite claim OG status, as I only started playing after the Dark Arisen DLC came out, which meant I missed the Berserk gear. But I, and every other Dragon's Dogma enjoyer, were rabid for a sequel. It took so long that some of us gave up hope, myself included. But lo and behold, Lord Itsuno has answered the call! Arisen around the world rejoiced when they dropped the news that we'd be getting a Dragon's Dogma 2. And then we went batshit crazy when we found out it was releasing in less than a year. And right now, we're just a little under 2 months away, with the game set to release on March 22nd this year. We've seen a good bit of the game already, but they've kept quite a few things close to their chest, namely the Vocations. Today, I'll be exploring my theories on how many and what kind of Vocations we have yet to see. My name is Mac, but you can call me Rusty. And let's dive into the possible Vocations of Dragon's Dogma 2. Firstly, if you've never played Dragon's Dogma, Vocations might be a new word. They're just like typical class options in other RPGs. No need to overthink it. However, the Vocations that we've gotten in previous games have all been very strong in regards to their class fantasy. So I'm very, very excited to see what else they have in store, which is partially why I'm making this video. So far, we've seen 10 Vocations revealed to us. Some might say that's all we're gonna get, but I heavily disagree. Obviously, that could be the case, and honestly, I wouldn't even be that upset, because the 10 that they've shown off already are badass. But I believe that Dragon's Dogma will launch with 18 Vocations. If not 18, then bare minimum would be 16. I've seen some people talk about there being 26. Maybe we'll get to that point sometime down the line, with free updates or DLC, but I think 18 is a little more reasonable. I'm not quite that far off my rocker just yet. Before I dive in, I'll need to explain the basis for my theory, which hinges on the idea of the color coding system from the previous 2 games still being implemented in this one. It could totally be that Capcom isn't doing that in this game. It's just a friendly reminder that these are crackpot theories of someone who is desperate to play this game, so take it with a grain of salt. If you haven't played the first Dragon's Dogma, their Vocations were split amongst 3 different colors: red, blue, and yellow. The sequel so far seems to be implementing a whole bunch of new colors, which is where these theories are stemming from. Even Dragon's Dogma Online used colors to differentiate what style of class you were playing, between DPS, tank, and healer. We've already seen the 4 starter Vocations we'll be getting, which are pretty much the exact same as the first game. We have Fighter returning, Mage returning, and we have the new Archer and the new Thief. Though it seems like Archer and Thief are just Strider, but split apart from melee and range, which will be interesting to see how that works. We've gotten 2 returning advanced Vocations with the Sorcerer and Warrior, and even a returning hybrid Vocation with the Magic Archer, which is the same color combo as the first game. And even in the scope of what we've seen, combining an Archer with a Mage, or blue and yellow, would make a Magic Archer. In fact, aside from the new Thief, all of the other Vocations I just listed have the exact same color as their prior counterpart. So I think we have a decent basis for these theories. Now, we do have the hybrid for red and blue, but it is a brand new Vocation, that being Mystic Spearhand, which looks incredible. But it seems to be replacing Mystic Knight for red and blue. Now, following this trend, the crazy thing that happened was when they revealed the Trickster. Do you see the colors? Another hybrid, but with 2 whole new colors. When I saw this, my brain stopped working. I'll get to this in a minute, but just keep this Vocation in mind for now. That leaves us with the last Vocation they've shown us so far, the Warfarer, which seems to be almost an ultimate class, where you can combine any 3 classes into one, which is just wild, and it is fittingly designated with a sort of white or gray. Now, what do the colors mean? This will help us decide on what Vocations belong to which colors. In the first game, this was rather easy, because you effectively had the 3 general archetypes in a fantasy setting. Red being the knight in heavy armor, or the barbarian with a bigger weapon. Blue being the wizened wizard or the supportive mage, and yellow being the roguish killer or the precise sniper. I think these still fit quite well, but harkening back to the starter Vocations, Archer and Thief, which were once one class, have been split apart. creating a new color, green. On top of that, we now see two new colors, pink and purple. White is kind of its own thing, so I'm not going to mention that too much, especially because I think that it's just going to be the warfare in that color. I propose that pink and purple are offshoots of red and blue, respectively, just like yellow and green are. Now, for yellow and green, it's pretty obvious to tell what they're splitting. Green being the melee-focused rogue DPS type, and yellow being the ranged DPS type. But what would be the difference between red and pink, or blue and purple? I think red in this game is very similar to the first, but with a higher emphasis on charging the enemy, being a more aggressive style tank archetype. I partially say this because of how mobile Mystic Spearhand seems to be. It doesn't seem quite fitting for a red vocation to be that fast, but if red in this game is all about getting to the enemy and being an aggressive frontliner, it would suddenly make sense. Pink, I believe, will be more of the defensive style of tanking, perhaps even based on counterattacks or buffing the party. Blue is still very much the central idea of a mage, a grand wizard casting mighty spells, or a more supportive role, able to keep their allies alive through even the most horrible debilitations. But purple, I think, will be more dark, twisted, occult magic. I think they'll be based around utility and debilitations, while perhaps having a faster casting time. Combining pink and purple would give you a strange concoction of debilitations and supporting the party while also drawing aggro, which the Trickster class seems to do. Now that I've lured you into where my headspace is, let's finally talk about what classes I think we'll see. Since I've been talking about pink and purple so much, let's start with them. Firstly, I think the only hybrid vocation we'll see that is either pink or purple is the Trickster. We might get more as DLC or free content updates, but I highly doubt we'll see all the hybrids they could branch from. I also don't think that they'll have starter vocations to unlock, because unlike the other four main colors, we don't start with these two, at least to our current knowledge. So that leaves us with one advanced vocation each. Let's start with pink. I believe this would be a good spot for a returning vocation in at least some degree. Something akin to the Shield Sage from the MMO or Mystic Knight from the first game. Both of these were relatively popular classes, mostly because of the Tower Shield aesthetic. I think it would be interesting if they went with a Braum approach from League of Legends, where you just have the Tower Shield and you're just lugging this big-ass slab of metal on your back, drawing aggro, blocking monsters, and maybe even buffing party members. Something I haven't really mentioned yet, but I think this wouldn't be too advanced of a vocation for a pawn to be. Since pawns can only be starter and advanced vocations, they would also have this vocation available for them. I think this would fit well, as then you would have two support pawn options rather than just having the mage. With purple, I could see something akin to a warlock or witch, maybe some type of darker caster wielding an effigy or idol of some kind, able to quickly cast spells that focus on debilitating foes and spells that deal continuous damage rather than big bursts like the Sorcerer does. The Warlock could be the one to learn Poisonous Fog Clouds and Torpor-Inducing Miasmas, with one of their final spells maybe being a returning spell from Dragon's Dogma, Exequy, the instant death spell. I could see the Warlock or Witch having some form of support by healing themselves and allies whenever an enemy dies to one of their spells. Maybe when an enemy dies, they could capture the essence of that creature and summon it as a temporary ally, or use it as a power buff to their spells. I think that about covers my idea for pink and purple, so that leaves us with the other two advanced vocations, green and yellow. Before I continue, some of what I'm about to say is inspired from a different YouTuber's vocation theory video, Infinite Cringe. You should go check out their stuff because they make some great videos. When it comes to green, I think I'm actually fairly confident in this. Perhaps the vocation I'm most confident in is that we'll be getting some type of monk vocation. I don't know if it'll end up as advanced green, but I am positive we'll be seeing a monk in Dragon's Dogma 2 in some capacity. They had something akin to it in the MMO, being the Alchemist, which had a magic gauntlet, and they had the monk vocation originally in their early concept ideas for Dragon's Dogma 1. I could see this vocation kind of taking the niche that the warrior used to have, in that it has a lot of knockdown power and stagger. In Dragon's Dogma 1, the warrior kind of had that niche, but it seems like the warrior in this game is going to be about raw damage output. Obviously, being advanced green, the monk would be very mobile, which I think fits, and it would probably have some kind of fist weapon. Though, I imagine if we're following the current trend of advanced vocations, the monk probably won't attack quite as fast as a thief, but will strike a bit harder. Advanced yellow is a little tricky. I don't really think they're just going to do ranger again, especially since it seems like short bows and long bows can both be used by the archer, which acted as the difference between a strider and a ranger in the first game. I could see it being a crossbow style class, having a very slow fire rate, and maybe even being a weak spot specialist style class, where you want to line up your big shots wherever the monster is the weakest. I think that's probably the safest answer, and it would go well with the idea that all other advanced vocations are slower attacking and harder hitting. It's one of those things though where I'm not sure what else it could actually be, so I'll tentatively say that advanced yellow will be some kind of arbalist. All we've got left are hybrid vocations. We've got red and green, red and yellow, blue and green and yellow. Let's start with red. Red-green could be a couple of things. I've heard that it could be some type of berserker class wielding twin axes. And while, honestly, I would prefer that, seeing as we still don't have any axe representation in any of the games so far, I believe that red-green, which is effectively replacing one aspect of the previous assassin class, would be some type of samurai vocation. I partially say this because Itsuno, the director of Dragon's Dogma, made a tweet back in 2022, long after he finished Devil May Cry 5, that he was studying katanas. Yes, I'm delusional. I also think a lighter armored frontline attacker would work pretty well for the sort of aesthetic of the samurai, especially if they make the samurai vocation based around counterattacks and timed attacks. You could do some cool anime shit, and we know Dragon's Dogma is not afraid of doing that kind of thing. I'm a little torn on this though, as a katana weapon would be a bit out of place in this mostly Western style world, so we'll see. But for this video, I am going to say red-green is a samurai. Now for red-yellow. This is effectively combining an aggressive frontline attacker with a ranged DPS vocation. I think and hope that we'll see some kind of Spartan class. A moderately armored spear and shield wielding frontliner that can throw their spear. I really hope a spear and shield class makes it into the game because I would play the hell out of it. It'd be a tough choice between this and the monk for me, but either way it'd be incredible. I can just imagine the kind of gameplay where it's less based on straight up blocking attacks like the fighter and shield sage, and more about parrying attacks, leaving them open to some devastating spear combos. Even just aesthetically, imagining playing this game and vibing like Pantheon from League, man, I hope they have something like this. So for red-yellow, I propose the Spartan vocation. Next up is blue-green, combining a roguish archetype with a magic caster. The other half of the magic archer. I don't really believe that they'll do a magic daggerist kind of class. They could, but I personally think that many people would much rather have some type of spellblade class. It's a bit more traditional. Seeing as how they've already done this before, and that it was incredibly popular, this is an easy spot for the return of the High Scepter from Dragon's Dogma Online. I've never actually played Dragon's Dogma Online, but I've seen plenty of gameplay. And I feel High Scepter, from what I've seen, would fit into blue-green perfectly. Effectively a magic swordsman class, with decent mobility and range, and big bursts of damage after you build up your meter. This is basically the bread and butter of High Scepter, from what I've seen at least. Pretty much fitting my idea of what a blue-green would be. And this would be a layup for the game, so I'm pretty confident of it being here. And finally, our last vocation. Yellow-green. I've heard some say that it'll just be the Strider class, but I think this would be pretty lazy, especially after seeing how the Warfarer will work. I think the only classes that will have multiple weapons are the aforementioned Warfarer, and classes that wield a shield like the Fighter or Spartan. So what would be a good combination for both roguish archetypes? Something with high mobility, range, and damage. I propose a ninja. The ninja could have a variety of weapon types. I could see them having a Kusarigama, effectively a chain sword on a whip, or they could have something like shurikens, or maybe even chakrams if they want to go crazy with it. You could do a bunch of cool shit with a ninja, like a high emphasis on stealth, maybe even invisibility, and then super high single target damage, either from a distance or up close. Either way, I think this kind of vocation would be a favorite among players. given how popular Assassin and Strider were in the first game. If you made it this far into the video, thank you so much for watching. If you liked the video, please feel free to like and subscribe. I'd love to hear your thoughts and ideas about possible vocations. I'll have more Dragon's Dogma videos in the future, and I'll probably start streaming some games while I endure this wait. You already know we're playing Dragon's Dogma Day 1. Thank you all, my name is Rusty, and I hope you all have a wonderful day.